judge made a comment at when I pled guilty that I think is promising anyway, like seems promising.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Good. So we're rolling, right, Trev?
Yes.
All right. And we're here back at Hat Studio with Chris Bentley. I always and I'm looking at the book. That's how my cheat sheet for the name, Burning Bellatorum. I did not have the book last time you were here.
No.
And so I have to tell the truth, I have not read it all yet. But so far, it's good. I mean, but it's like I knew the story already, but the insights are good. I especially like. Didn't I post something?
You did.
A picture from page 19, where you said the thing you learned in the military was to keep a positive frame of mind no matter what.
Yeah.
Which you're doing, like
Absolutely.
clearly.
You're helping, by the way.
Which, by the way, let's. So cheers. We did
Cheers.
this already, but we didn't do it for the camera.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't get to have a drink last time you were here because you were on some sort of crazy diet.
Yes. Yeah. I finished that diet.
You don't look any different. I don't think it was worth it. No, actually,
Lost 45
actually
pounds.
you do. Yeah. You 45 pounds.
Yeah.
On what's it called?
75 hard. So it was no drinking
so many
for
jokes.
75
There's just
days.
Too many jokes to
Yeah.
make about that. So what do you do for 75 days?
No alcohol, 2 workouts a day. One of them has to be outside. A gallon of water a day. Stick to a diet. Can be any diet that you choose, except for like the cheeseburger diet, unfortunately. But stick to a diet for 75 days. Was it 2 and 10 pages of a nonfiction reading, physical reading, not like audiobooks or whatever.
So interestingly, they don't prescribe a specific food plan.
No.
It's like
And I didn't count calories. I just did intermittent fasting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So is that now? I've heard 2 different versions of intermittent fasting. I always thought it was like you skip one meal. Well, not that you skip a meal necessarily, but you leave a certain amount of hours.
Yeah.
And what that always amounted to for me was, well, it means I'm basically not having breakfast, and you're going from dinner until lunch. Or some people do it.
Yeah. So for me, my hours that I was allowed to eat were 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
And so I didn't eat anything after 6 ever.
Yeah.
And I didn't start eating till 10. And but I watched what I ate as far as like, I didn't have pizza and burgers or something. But if I was on the road, like driving, and I had to stop at a gas station, I'd get a bag of Chex Mix and, a Snickers bar or something. And that,
Yeah.
so I didn't really, I wasn't militant about my diet.
So recently I was talking to a guy though who his hours to eat it's only 4 hours, and it's like 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the p.m. So he's really only just eating dinner every day.
You can take it as extreme as you want, but
So that's not really. But I don't see how that's intermittent fasting. That just sounds like not eating. Right, like I'm just eating one meal.
Yeah,
one meal a day.
it's you're
mean,
fasting for
if
in
you-
his case 20 hours, right?
I mean, if you eat 1/3 to half as much as you normally eat, then you're gonna lose weight, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't really matter when you do it. It would seem like, but anyway, he's got the same. He dropped 35 or 40 pounds. So all right, so you got that done.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk. So last time, when you were on, and you were in one of the first few episodes, so the show's been launched for a month now.
Yeah.
This one we'll probably get this one out in the next couple of weeks or something. I remember we said we didn't talk too much about your story, what the book is about, because we were kind of getting the ball rolling with the whole American dream, and we do want to stay kind of under that umbrella topic, but there's a lot of different things we can talk about. And one of the things that you brought up, which is, related to your experience the last, has it been 2 years now?
Yeah, about 2 years.
2 years is criminal justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get to that.
Yeah.
But first, just really quick. So you had some new developments now, or the process is moving along.
Absolutely.
And
Finally.
So I want to hear about that. But for people who don't necessarily know the story and haven't read the book, can you just like quickly like summarize how did you get to why this news is very interesting right now?
Yeah. So, long story short, had a company in the mineral rights investment space. Did really well our first few years. Legitimate, above board operation. Started to face some challenges in early 2019, and didn't have the financial runway to weather any type of storm. Not an excuse. So just giving you context. So I started lying and committing fraud, basically to cover up the bad financial state of the company, to cover the operating overhead. I would move money around from unauthorized accounts, investor money that was only meant to be for investing. I was using to cover payroll and rent and software subscriptions and things of that nature. So,
and you're thinking, I just need to buy some time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, that's what happens.
Slippery slope.
You get under pressure there, and you go, okay, I just need to buy 2 weeks, so I'm gonna take this and do this with it. But then in 2 weeks, this is gonna happen, and it's all gonna. Right.
So I mean, and everybody knows what happened in early 2020. So I go into COVID with already like needing, trying to buy time, and then COVID happened, which really affected the oil and gas industry. And, and then I still kept doing it, digging a deeper hole. Long story short, I went and turned myself into the feds in April of 2021. So, a little over a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Didn't get charged for almost a year and a half. So we're going on a year and 9 months now, closer to that. But anyway, finally got charged in August of this year. Took forever to get a hearing where I would plead guilty.
So what's happening that whole time between April 2021, and you go down to the local FBI office and you say, "I'm here to turn myself in."
Yeah, I thought I was going to jail. I took an Uber, man, because I thought I didn't want my wife to have to.
But instead, they send you home.
Send me home,
and they say,
"We'll be in touch."
Don't leave the country.
Seriously. I mean, I wish there was like you could have my lawyer that I had hired and the prosecutors to sit here and talk about this too, because it's got to be a wild story. I mean, the FBI agent told me that I was the first person to ever do this. And then like a few days later, when they came to my office to get evidence and like take computers and stuff, I literally helped her load the car with like the computers. And she's like, "This is crazy. This is like, I've never had anybody help me load their evidence into the trunk of my car before." But anyway, so yeah, nothing happened. I mean, they did some initial interviews, then got the SEC involved. They interviewed me. And
did they believe, like, did they accept right up front that you were telling the truth and it wasn't some sort of like prank or hoax or something?
Yeah. I mean, I think they were, I think this is a morbid analogy, but I was like, "So what's going on? How come you haven't charged me yet?" I was getting kind of like, what's going on here? What do I do? And they're like, "Look, you could tell us you committed murder, but we still got to find the bodies." That was what one of them said to me. I can't remember who said that, but one of them said that to me. I'm like, okay, so basically they had to go do the forensic accounting.
There has to be an investigation.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
So they did a long investigation, which I was always cooperative, shared everything. I'm like, this should be fast because, you're not having to find somebody and kick down doors to get what you need.
Yeah.
And anyway, it took forever.
Well, I mean, I guess it's, I guess they probably prioritize their activities based on, what's a threat, what has to be. Yeah, don't chew the ice. I get yelled at.
My bad.
All the time. Don't chew these. It's getting the death stare from behind the curtain.
But yeah, I don't know what their thinking was on why it took so long.
Probably they were busy looking for the bodies of the guy who did say that he murdered somebody. And they didn't have time
I
for you.
guess it's crazy to me though. It's like
that is a long time. Well, it was the middle of COVID, right?
I mean, April 2021 is when I turned myself in. Yeah. So, I mean, there were no masks at the meeting or anything.
We were long past COVID in Texas anyway.
Yeah, in Texas.
I think some other places were still doing it, but so okay. So you just got charged. So you got formally charged. So you
In
had an
August.
arraignment. You had
Yep.
oh,
I had in August. You have this is the crazy thing too. You cannot plead guilty no matter what at your arraignment. You can't plead guilty.
I thought arraignment is where you say how you plead.
Craziest
That's
thing.
not how it
I
worked.
don't know if it's
my
federal.
cousin Vinny. That was how it worked.
Hey, I don't know if it's a federal thing. Maybe somebody in your audience will know. But I got there August. It was August 23rd. I'm like, finally, I'm ready to say I don't have a lawyer, by the way. I just show up to court, ready, expecting to go to jail again that day.
Wow.
And I kind of get, not in an argument, but I'm like, are you serious? This isn't it? Like, we got to go to another hearing? So anyway, August 23rd, the federal public defender and the prosecutor, the federal public defender on duty is like there just to help people with court procedure. She wasn't assigned to me. She's the one that made it to where I could drink, just not excessively.
That's right. We should have said that before somebody calls up.
But anyway, so they say you're not allowed to plead guilty. This is it's called a hearing, an arraignment hearing in front of a magistrate judge. You plead not guilty at this hearing, no matter what. So anyway, I had to plead not guilty. I was like frustrated. So anyways, plead not guilty and get my federal public defender assigned to me, and then expecting to go to court a month later to actually plead guilty in front of the actual judge that I get assigned to. All right. Get a notice in the mail that the hearing's been pushed back for whatever reason. I don't even remember. It was just, I remember I was like, geez, why is this dragging out?
Yeah.
But anyway, long story short, a couple weeks ago, I went and actually, no, one week ago. Yeah,
last
one week ago from today, I went and I finally pled guilty in front of the judge. And now they've set the sentencing hearing for February 16th. So that'll be Judgment Day, literally.
Well, you get to have Valentine's Day anyway, and Christmas.
Yeah.
So, and this is not, it's not just you. I mean, you have a family, right? And so I can only imagine the anxiety,
Yeah, it's the uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
It's like purgatory, being in purgatory, I imagine, it's like, when is this going to end? Like, let's get some closure.
Yeah.
And not just, selfishly for me and my family, obviously, like I'm ready to just get this behind me. But, I imagine, I've gotten a few messages from investors that they think I'm dragging this out, and I'm not. Like, I've wanted this to be done since April of last year.
But you can understand why they would think that.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's what people would typically do.
Yeah, of course. And I don't blame them.
Stay out of jail as long as you can.
I don't blame them. But for me, my thought process is like, let's get this done so I can move on with my life.
Sure.
I can make restitution. Right now, it's very difficult for me to earn any money. And I'm not saying that like, oh, feel sorry for me. I'm saying, like, if the investors want their money back, I need to get this behind me so I can work on some projects, that can earn material income.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what, there was something you said that I was totally lost it. I don't know what it was.
I'm guilty of going on a rant.
No. So the investors think that you're dragging it out, and you're not. Oh yeah. So, what was it you said?
So the judge had the hearing where I pled guilty. Maybe it was something related to that.
Okay. So you pled guilty. You got the sentencing coming up in February. So that will be going on 2 years since you.
Getting close to the 2-year mark.
So how? So there's these investors, because you had to come clean with them too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I sent an email. It's out on social media and on the internet, and in the book. There's a, it's in the book too. But yeah. So,
like, I mean, obviously they're not happy with you.
Yeah. Of course not.
Yeah. And I've seen you've made a lot of statements about you're going to do everything you can to make everybody whole. But yeah, I guess it is going to take some time because
Yeah, I mean, I lost everything. It's not your typical fraud where, they can go seize mansions and boats and Ferraris and stuff and start making people whole, because I didn't take their
Yeah.
money and buy things and
right. That would have been better, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been better for them as far as getting their money back. I made investments with their money, but then where I lost the most amount of money was because I ended up getting debt on the portfolio, which not illegal. I didn't disclose it, which is unethical, but not illegal. I had the right to basically manage the fund any way I wanted to. But anyway, I couldn't make the debt covenants and lost all the assets, the mineral rights that we own, the royalties. And, so that was the main portion of the losses. Obviously, the money that I took and used for overhead, that was pure loss because I wasn't buying any assets.
I got you.
But I mean, I lost my house, my cars, my investments, my personal investments, because I levered those as well. I got loans, hard money loans against my own assets, put that money in the company, and I, I'm not saying I'm a saint by any means, but I did not want to lay off my staff during COVID. That was like the big thing where I started really.
How many people did you have?
At the height, 21.
Okay.
And the most I laid off was 5. I got down to 16. And, should have laid off everybody technically instead of doing what I did. But, I don't know.
Yeah, I got you. So, anyway, it's in the book. You can buy the book, read the book. So the thing about the book is, I did get the hardcover, by the way.
Thank you. That's more royalties. All the proceeds from the book go toward restitution.
Right.
And the hardcover is the best one to buy because it gets the most profit.
Yeah.
So thank you.
For those of you following along at home, buy the book. But the book is, but it's good because you tell the story, but you also say this is what I learned, and here's advice for other people. And so there's some good insights and things like that. And as I mentioned, I haven't got all the way through it yet. But I kind of know how it ends.
You and I have talked offline quite a bit.
So all right. So let's put this in the context of. So we wanted to talk about. So you've had an up close look at criminal justice system now, and my first thought is, especially in thinking about, so when we do this show, I'm always thinking about life in America potentially versus life in other places. And I would guess that if you're going to be in this predicament, this is probably one of the better countries to be in this predicament in.
100%.
But so as you've gone through this, so besides like the main part of the story, what have you observed, learned? What are your thoughts about the criminal justice process?
If I didn't have, I think I'm gonna stick to entrepreneurship, and I'm getting to answer your question.
Yeah.
But this is why, because after this experience, I feel like I have a new calling. Like I would like to somehow be involved in criminal justice, whether becoming a lawyer and being a public defender or something. But because of the restitution amount being so large, I think I need to stick to entrepreneurship. But I've learned a lot. As you said, from what I've done a lot of reading. I've read so many memoirs and books from people around the world, not just in the United States, who've dealt with, committing crimes and going to jail in other countries. I mean, there's a famous guy named Nick Leeson, had a book called The Rogue Trader, and he went to prison in Singapore for financial crimes, and his experience absolutely 180 difference to mine, right?
Yeah. They didn't send him home and say we'll be in touch.
No, and exactly, and his conditions, what he ate, his medical treatment, all those things, right? Like my experience will be much easier, for lack of better terms, than his, I'm sure, right? However, with that being said, there is a lot of room for improvement here. I mean, as I mentioned just a minute ago, think about the inefficiency and the cost to the taxpayer of a guy who turns himself in and says, "Hey, send me to jail. Let's I want to pay my penance and get this done. Let's do it." I'm here. I'm sitting here 2 years, almost 2 years later, and I had to go to a court session where he paid a magistrate judge, federal employee, for me to say not guilty, even though I wanted to say guilty. I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
things like that. Like,
Yeah.
why? What is the point of it? And nobody can tell me. You know.
So
So that's just the way we've done it. You know.
yeah, so obviously there's some cost. I mean, I guess I would say, well, the question is, what, how much does your situation represent the norm? Could be that because you're not dangerous, you don't appear to be committing ongoing crimes, you're not running from the law, maybe because of that you're kind of on the slow track. Does everybody, because and so yeah, you probably cost a little bit more taxpayer money than you could have, but in the grand scheme, a couple of court appearances and a few,
I guess. I mean, think about this. What is justice about, right? It's about
yeah,
the victim and society and restore, like, and if bureaucracy in certain scenarios, bureaucracy has its place, and being slow is actually to society's advantage in certain scenarios. But you should always have mechanisms in place to speed it up. If, it would have been to my investor's advantage, to the victim's advantage.
Yeah.
I could be close, who knows what my sentence is going to be. I don't know. The investors don't know. The prosecution doesn't know. It's all up to the judge.
But if it were 4 years, you'd be halfway through it now.
Right.
Because you're not going to be winning them back a bunch of money if you're in prison.
Right. And I'm not right now while I'm stagnant and nobody will hire me to make big money until I've had people say, "Hey, look, I know you know your business, you're smart, you're capable of doing big things, but I just don't want to work with you until you get this behind you."
Yeah,
and
because what if you get a big head of steam built up and then all of a sudden you're gone? Right. Now what do I do?
And so, it may sound arrogant.
That's the real injustice there is the investors.
Right. And it may sound arrogant, but I do think I can make restitution every penny. Like it's $40 million. That's probably not the court amount because technically it wasn't $40 million of fraudulent, money transactions, but the losses add up to $40 million. And at the end of the day, I want to make, even if the court only says, "Hey, the restitution's $4 million," which it looks like based on the documents that they've put out, is that the amount that I took fraudulently was $4 million. And that's 2 years of overhead basically at the company. But I want to pay back all $40 million, and I think I can. I mean,
so the difference is the $40 million represents the amount of money that would have been made if those investments had been
that's like the principal amount of between debt and equity, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't account, $40 million doesn't account for opportunity costs or inflation or interest, things of that nature. But the principal amount of other people's money that I had was roughly $40 million, a little bit over.
So you did, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So there's $4 million that you used to
fund the overhead of the company, and $36 million
that got lost because everything went under. Right.
Yeah.
I got you.
Now, the debt, the lien holder on the assets got the assets, so they, I saw in the discovery documents, which I was entitled to read, from that they sent over, that the lien holder has said that they think they'll be made at least 90% whole just from the royalty income and the sale of the assets or whatever. So, maybe knock off some because of that, right? But
yeah. But here's the interesting part is that if you add this all up together, you've got you who are presumably a good guy who got in trouble, made some bad decisions. It seems like maybe you're going to go to prison, maybe you're not. I don't know, but potentially you are, and
Very likely, it's from what I hear.
yeah. But for some length of time, right? And maybe it's not going to be the rest of your life, but
At least a couple years.
it's not going to be 3 months,
Right.
right? And in spite of all that, you're able to look at the whole situation and not say, well, that's it, my life is over. You're able. So part of this is due to what we talked about earlier, which is your lesson on page 19, which is always maintain a positive outlook. But it's not like, I don't think it's blind optimism on your part, because you're actually able to look and say, okay, at this particular point in history, in this country, in Texas, in the United States, all things being what they are, I think that I can get through this. I can come back later, and it's not just. I don't think it's just, again, blind optimism, because what you've been doing in the last year and a half is, like, you've been doing a lot of legwork, right? You've been talking to people. Like, you didn't just get arrested yesterday and you're like, I'm gonna come back later. Like you've been doing your homework all along,
right?
And now you're looking and saying, okay, I think I can get there from here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of remarkable. That it's remarkable that you have that attitude and that sort of foresight, but it also says something about the place in which we live,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's so, to live in a world where you could do that.
So, look, if I were in India is a good example, right? I read something a few weeks ago. I can't remember where. I think it was in the Atlantic, but India has
Atlantic.
India
Read
has
a real newspaper.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
India has like 100-year waiting list on like some court dockets, right? And also not there. There's no, so if you get arrested, no real like bail system or worry about human rights in the legal system. So for me, the judge just said, we don't need you to go to jail. I didn't petition. I was ready to go to jail. They said, you're out on bond. I didn't have to pay any money. So like, it was just like, hey, you can't leave Texas. You can't drink excessively, which, it was going to be, you can't drink at all. But then the lawyer chimed in and said, that's irrelevant, whatever. So anyway, in India, though, if I were to do this in India or Singapore, like Nick Leeson that I brought up,
yeah,
I'd be incarcerated with no, as much as I was complaining about this last, year and a half to 2 years, that, if I were in India or Singapore, doesn't matter. Nobody would tell me anything. And
you just be in jail.
Be in jail. And I might die in jail without ever being officially charged. I mean, that happens in India and probably a lot of other countries. I'm just bringing India up because I read about it, right?
Yeah, and well, the interesting thing there is India isn't. Whenever we talk about, life being hard in other countries, people usually always think of the evil totalitarian, authoritarian governments where,
right.
Well, of course, there's all kinds of human rights abuses, right? The same 3 or 4 countries always come to mind,
right?
But India's not a.
No.
I mean,
you would think, right? You would think that India's.
It's not a place where where they're.
There are hard conditions there, but it's not because of an oppressive government.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right. Yeah. So it is what it is. That's
big population, emerging infrastructure and economy, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, look. That's the thing, like you're saying, you got to find the silver lining or the bright side, if you will, in everything in life, I think. And look, there are times when I'm throwing a pity party for myself, don't get me wrong,
sure.
But I have to quickly remind myself, like, to your point, and to the theme of the podcast, like, hey, I'm in America, and there is a path, there is a way to redemption here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places I could be where there could be no path toward redemption.
Yeah. Yeah. That, it also, it kind of throws a little bit of light too on, now, you haven't succeeded at that yet.
I have not. No,
so
you're right.
But
please buy the book if you're listening.
Buy the book. Buy the book. you haven't. So you haven't. However, let's just say that, like I said, you've been doing your homework for the last year and a half. You have a plan. You're seeing the other side of it, and you're going, okay, I can see where I can not only get my life back and be, reasonably comfortable and happy, but I can make all these people whole as
Yes.
well, and maybe more than I have to. And the reason why you're able to do that, part of the reason is because you're of where you are, and you live in a country where you can do that, and part of it is because you've got the motivation and the attitude and all that. Now, let's look at people who say, so I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a podcast. I don't have to be nice. So it kind of makes you look at, or to me anyway, at other people who aren't don't have the deck stacked against them the way you do, and you go, so what's your excuse, right? What is with all the bitching and moaning, and all of the we want to have this and we want to have that, and you should did it right, and let's forgive the student loans because they're never going to be able to pay them off, and let's have all these ways in which we turn the dials to make everything fair for everybody. When you look at your situation, and let's just assume that you're going to get where you see yourself getting is where you're going to get, right? Then how do you justify all of the complaining and the somehow the system is rigged against me?
I'm with you, man. I know. Look, I know some demographics, minorities, females, whatever, have it harder, right? But that's not an American phenomenon. That is a human phenomenon. Anywhere, people are tribal, people stick to their kind, it's just natural, right? And, I laugh when I see these, studies about Scandinavia, and they're like, well, they do it this way in Scandinavia. And I'm like, Scandinavia is 98.9% white, and their immigration policy is very closed. You have to have a PhD, $1 million in your bank account, and pass an IQ test with a certain score. I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but it's very closed. And they say, oh, well, let's compare ourselves to Scandinavia. I'm like, it's not. You can't do that here.
On top of that, you got a single country. Last I heard, Norway had 5 million people.
Yeah,
that's Houston.
Smaller than Texas. Yeah. Smaller than Houston. Yeah.
So
it's ridiculous, though. We have. Anyway, I mean, we could rant all day about this, but to answer your question, I don't know what the excuse is. I think we're also guilty as a society of creating our own problems. And, it goes to that saying, I'm going to butcher it, but it's hard times make strong men, and strong men make good times, and then good times make weak men, or something like that. That quote. Well, we're our predecessors that made America so great, where we could focus on things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Now we have a large subset of the population that thinks they shouldn't have to work, and cares, oh, I feel like I'm a tree today, or a girl even though I'm a boy, or whatever. And it's I'm not that. I'm empathetic, I guess is the word, to your feelings, but it's not a national policy issue. Go talk to your mom and dad, or your therapist, or your school counselor about it, but don't change the laws in our country. Don't change our military to be weaker because you feel like a different gender today, or for these few years in your life, now we got to change the entire military, which, by the way, I feel strongly about, having served in the Marines. Now you're weakening our national security
And
force.
combat in ways, right? Right.
And so instead of training, like being at the rifle range to shoot, Marines are now sitting in an auditorium listening to why, hey, they have to be politically correct about gender pronouns. It's like, that's what your taxpayer dollars are paying for.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, yeah. So I guess, yeah, we could go off on a whole bunch of bunch of tangents.
Criminal justice reform.
By the way, to me, the smart thing, if you're gonna say that like you are something because that's what you believe you are, like I would go for endangered species because like they get a lot of good treatment from the government, right? Like nobody can I want to be I want to identify as a bald eagle. Are they still endangered? Because you get all kinds of like federal you get federal protection when you do that. I mean, that seems to be the smart way.
Live at Yellowstone Park,
for free. That's right.
That's you're on to something, man.
It seems like that's the way. If you're gonna do it, that's the way to go. But but I think maybe the more interesting thing here than the like long ass amount of time it took you to get sentenced is that if you listen to what you hear like in the media and people talking and whatnot, you get the impression that you could get the impression, especially if you're a younger person and you haven't really like lived much yet, you could easily get the impression that like this place is really broken. Like this country's really, really broken. The system's no good. Well, we have this crazy notion of merit-based compensation programs in companies where you like I have to actually perform for you to pay. I had somebody tell me that, and this is going back probably almost 10 years. A young person said in a company where I was in charge of a lot of things, and she said she was just really frustrated about how much she was making. And I kept trying to say, look, like you're making what you should be making based on what you do and your experience and things. But like I can chart a path for you that says if you accomplish these things and like this is how you can make more money. And she finally like threw up her hands and she said, well, if this company is just going to be stuck on a merit-based compensation approach, then I don't think I can work here anymore.
Wow.
And at first I had no idea. I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. What other kind of compensation is there? And then I learned about how this idea of, well, you should pay me for my potential now, right? You were probably busy like trying to do other things when this was evolving, but
whoa.
Yeah. So all of these things, right, you would get the impression that the minimum wage is too low. The system is partial and unfair against certain groups of people. There needs to be more government money poured into programs for people. Like you would get the impression that like this place is really broken. And then you sit here and you listen to you and you go, okay, I probably got to do some time, and then I think I can get clear to this, and I can get that's a very stark contrast.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there are broken things here, but it's not the end of the world, right? And we should fix them. We should work on the things that matter, but there's a lot of things that left up to the private sector that should be left up to the private sector to fix, and that they would do a better job, right? Now, the criminal justice stuff we were talking about, I mean, it could be worse, as we brought up, like the India scenario. But, there are things like, feeling a little sorry for myself. We're in Texas. I was in the military. I'm losing my gun rights for the rest of my life because I stole money or misappropriated money, whatever you want to call it, stole, and used it for something I shouldn't. So now for the rest of my life, I'm not allowed to own guns. I think that's wrong. I think also voting, I'm not allowed to vote anymore. I don't know, maybe a period of time.
Wait, is that true? Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and
But, like, forever?
I don't know. Like, I can't get a clear answer from people. They say you can get your voting rights restored. You cannot get your gun rights restored, but it takes like you got to basically.
What about if you give up your American citizenship, go to another country, and then come here illegally? Then you could probably vote.
Yeah.
Then
It's funny. As some people have said that to me. They said you should just, when you get out of prison, just become a citizen of another country and then come back illegally.
And you'll get all kinds of privileges that you gave up.
Oh, man.
Of the gun thing, though, I think you're gonna have to buy an island. You'd have to.
I'm not even a gun nut. I just believe in that you should have the right to defend yourself and like not have to wait for the police to show up if an intruder comes in your home. And and
what about bow and arrow? You could.
Yeah, I better get good at knife fighting, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to become a 19th degree martial arts, multiple martial arts, and know how to knife fight.
Or learn how to throw those star things or something like that. You could. Well, I think another thing out of this story, right, with the courts and there is, and I don't know, we might have talked about this the last time, or maybe I talked to somebody else about it, but so I grew up in a
Jersey.
Yeah, I did. And I don't know if it was that time or that place or whatever, but the general working assumption that most adults had, and I learned this just from hearing adults talk, is that if the government's doing it, they're going to screw it up. Like, they're no good at anything, right? Yeah, you got to go to the post office to mail a package. Forget about it. There's going to be one person working. All the other things are going to be empty, and you're going to have to wait in line for 45 minutes, right? Like, like even those fundamental things, like the government, or the old thing about, if you can't, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach work for the government. Nothing against. There's plenty of great government workers who are very smart,
and good teachers.
And good teachers. But the point is, this notion was that, well, as soon as the government, because of like just the machine and the bureaucracy and the everything, as soon as it goes into action, which is why throughout my adult life, I always had this notion that says, anytime there's something where like the government wants, whether it's the federal government or local, state, bonds, whatever, anytime they say we want to have more money to spend, my automatic answer is always no. Not because the thing they want to spend it on is necessarily bad, but because I know that they suck at like using the money to actually accomplish anything.
Well, it's just inefficient, right? A Harvard professor wrote a book called Bureaucracy. I forgot I think the last name is Wilson, but he coined this term called bureaucratic inertia, and I think it's perfect, right? Like it's like snowball effect of not my job, and then you get the DMV experience all over the,
or either not my job or I can't
add more red tape or whatever.
Well, you can't do that until you do this, and you can't do this. I mean, this is why TurboTax is such like a huge seller, and is so. It's just a good example of the same thing, right?
Especially the federal court system, which I'm dealing with right now.
And I can't imagine that your situation is. I kind of suggested earlier that, well, maybe you're unique because you were different, but I gotta believe that.
Yeah, I mean, when people say that, I'm like, I still believe that there's people who are good people who do bad things. Like I think I'm a good person who did some bad things.
I got news for you. All good people do bad things.
Well, and then feel guilty because I went and there was no investigation happening. There wasn't like, oh my gosh, I better just go turn myself in before they kick in my door. Like I went and told them.
Right.
Nobody knew anything. Right. And I thought that maybe not a normal scenario, right, but that it had happened, that other people do it, and I still would like to think that that's happened before. People do something and they say, look, I can't deal with the guilt. Let me turn myself in. But
possibly, but probably not. And I would guess probably not for something of that size, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
but still, the process. You would think that if there was, I know we're at the. This means we must be at the end of the show because we're at the end of the glass. if the process for you was this, protracted, then I mean, what if it was really complicated?
Yeah, that's what I wonder is like, but I've seen other cases get adjudicated, like get started after mine, and the dude's in prison now. I've been, as I said, I've been like going down rabbit holes with all these legal
Yeah.
things, not especially white collar crime in the US, but all over and all types of crimes. And it's like, you know, my attorney said something, and she said, look, maybe it's because there's no fun in your case. Like, people sign up to be an FBI agent or a prosecutor to go after bad guys, and maybe they're just like, well,
Yeah.
I'd rather focus on the stuff that I signed up to do, not get some guy,
Yeah. Well, which also kind of speaks to the other thing about if you were in another country, you wouldn't have that much freedom. And what it has done is it's given you time to do a lot of these things that you've been trying to do to kind of help. So I know it's been frustrating to
Absolutely.
but you've been able to do a lot of good things during that time,
Yeah.
right? Which,
no, definitely.
which,
Thank you. I mean, and look, you have to, right? Like, you can't. It's frustrating. Like, I still think it would have been better had I started my sentence, whatever that is, and be on the path towards getting on the other side. However, maybe my two sons are better off because of this time that I spent here with them.
I think there's a point at which it becomes, okay, now it's too long, but having some amount of time is probably good because it gives you time to tell your story. It gives you time to at least begin to express to people what you plan to do. Like, if all of a sudden, if you'd walked in there that day, turned yourself in, and were off to prison, well, you're not going to get to do much from there. You're not going to get to tell a story. So at that point, everybody's just wondering, what happened to Chris?
Yeah.
Right? And then a few years later, you come out, and now you're trying to, like, in retrospect, explain, and too much time has gone by, and so you're it's kind of letting you, like, put in all the foundation for what you want to do later.
Plant some seeds
now.
for sure. Yeah.
But I'm with you. Like, if it drags out too long, then it's just So good. All right. Well, we are at the end, and the little timer on the wall says we probably should be
Wrapping up.
We should. Who wrote that smile you're on camera
I
on?
was wondering the same thing.
Because
I'll smile though. Which camera do I look at?
Because that looks like, I'm going to say this, even though it's probably politically incorrect, it looks like a girl wrote it.
Oh.
And
yeah. You're so rude.
It doesn't look like an actual girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks. And so you're going to be, so your sentencing is in February. So
Yeah.
So for sure, so we'll get to talk again.
Yeah.
Between
we'll talk
now and then.
again. Hopefully
And,
have another bourbon.
Yeah. Well, we need to get
I
together.
owe you a bottle, by
You-
the way, because of that heavy pour that I did. Sorry about that.
No. That's all you. You can have it. So yeah, that's it. I guess we're done. Chris
Thanks for having me on, man. I
Chris
appreciate
Bentley.
it.
Thank you. All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks
We're
for
done.
having me on.